bogs. Mysterious and muddy, these powerful landscapes cover Ireland and many other parts of the world in a foreboding layout of shrubbery and barren trees. Very little life makes its way through these unoxygenated peatlands, but what manages thrives in these unique feats of nature. But there's a lot more to the bogs of Ireland lying just below the surface. Beneath the lush moss, mysteries ranging from the decadent to the downright bizarre lurk in the muck. A bewilderingly beautiful biosphere thrives despite extraordinarily acidic and nutrient-poor habitats. And in one of the world's most unique ecosystems, a large piece in the fight against climate change is being unearthed. Join us for a journey through these marvels of nature as we reveal the secrets of the bogs. Our journey begins in the blanket bogs of Capure.
Welcome to the blanket bogs of the Wicklow Mountains. Here we have these ancient mountains have been covered in a type of peat or type of peatland called the blanket bog. And blanket bogs are unique.
But what is a bog? How are they formed? And what exactly makes bogs so special?
My name is Stephen Robinson, and I am director and professor with Champlain College's Dublin, Ireland campus. I am an academic, although I'm an administrator as well. So I consider myself an environmental geoscientist. I specialize in a lot of climate change related things. But I also more currently am doing research into the impact of international education and study abroad on climate. Bogs are formed when we have inadequate drainage for some reason, and the vegetation then will build up over thousands of years. Some of those can be, 7, 8, 9 meters thick by the time that they've reached this age, and most of them would be around 10,000 years old or something by now. In other parts of Ireland, especially where we have lots and lots of rainfall, especially on the west coast, we would have blanket bogs. And these blanket bogs, they have some form of some impermeable base to them, so the water can't really drain. And it gets clogged up with material, and a hard pan forms, and it doesn't drain. And even though they're on a slope, the vegetation will continue to accumulate over time. These are much thinner, they're much younger than some of the other bogs that we have in the middle part of the country here. But they certainly do store a lot of carbon, and they're very active in vegetation growth and things like that. We also find them near Dublin in the Wicklow Mountains. Here there's so much water falling that you end up not being able to drain properly, and it just forms on the slopes. And it will form, underneath my feet is probably 2, 3, 4 meters of peat. And most of it at the surface is composed of various types of vegetation. Here we have feather moss, okay? When this decomposes or when it dies, it will be buried by the next generation of feather moss, and the dead stuff will be incorporated down into the peat. And it decomposes very, very slowly there, and so over time the whole bog will grow.
But the Wicklow mountain bogs aren't as rich as they once were. Decades of human involvement have taken their toll and left visceral scars in this decadent landscape.
Peat bogs in Ireland are being destroyed, or have been traditionally destroyed, for two main reasons. One is cutting the peat for use as a fuel. Traditionally, people would cut this and use it in their fireplaces to keep their houses warm. But also, Ireland has this history of draining bogs and then planting on them. That loses the carbon sequestration benefits that a bog has in it, and it changes the biodiversity, it changes the hydrology. Here we are standing in a drainage ditch that the radio mast road had to have a little drainage ditch cut so it didn't flood, and so you drain the area. But it gives us a really great exposure, a really great section through the peat bog here. And you can see here we've got 2 or 3 meters of accumulated dead organic material and the living layer up top. Okay? So when you strip off that living layer, then this gets exposed to decomposition.
Long, deep trenches tear through much of Ireland's bogs as a result of these destructive practices, leaving these ecosystems vulnerable and unable to continue their natural processes. While regulated now, human encroachment on these wild, flat areas left an unfortunate sight in their wake.
Kippure Mountain is interesting because in the 1950s they built a radio tower at the top, and in order to build that tower they had to clear the blanket bog from the top. Now then, when they dug down and they cleared the blanket bog in order to build the radio tower on firm footing, they ended up disturbing the surface of the bogs, and since then they have been degrading rapidly. But this wouldn't have happened if the surface had been left alone and we hadn't built on it. But you can see, if you pan down the valley, the whole valley for several hundred meters has been slowly degrading since they built this radio tower.
While these deep cuts do mean tragedy for the bogs themselves, getting a scientific eye on layers of ancient soil dating as far back as the last ice age can give us a lot of insight into the state of our planet in years gone by. And, as the history of the bogs themselves can be exposed in the layers of recycled soil, so can the history of the Irish people, preserved nearly perfectly in the depths. The processes that allow plant material to build and accumulate also result in the unique preservation of ancient artifacts. As peat was harvested and bogs were drained, historians and citizens alike were finding their country's history just below their feet. From objects of the past, like brooches and swords, to the eerie human remains known as bog bodies. It's clear that bogs have even more history to share.
Bogs are really good at preserving organic material, and that can be bodies, that can be vegetation, all these things. In order to decompose something organic, you really need two things. You need oxygen and you need water. Bogs have got lots and lots of water. They're probably 90% water content, most of them. What they're lacking is oxygen. If you dig up a bog body or you find a bog body, and they're not all that common, but if you do find one, then it quite often looks like it's been tanned, like the skin has been turned to leather. But the body itself is preserved primarily through the acid and the lack of oxygen.
It is through these natural processes that much of Ireland's history has been retained. An entire culture unburied in layers of peat, as individuals all over Ireland find relics from years gone by.
My name is Anya Fury, and I have worked as a tour guide and education assistant and other things for the last 23 years. 23 years. I've worked most places, but what you'd be most interested in is the work in and out of the National Museum of Ireland, Archaeology Museum. And I've worked there since about 2003. Quite a lot. I can't give a percentage of the artifacts in the National Museum. You're talking coming from bogs. Really, a lot of them are found accidentally, like the bog bodies that we're going to be talking about. They were found in 2003. It was just a remarkable find because since finding those bodies, they have a whole new theory that it's kingship and sacrifice, that they were kings or nobles ritually sacrificed to the land, you know. So Cloneycavan man, he, for instance, was found in the bog. He was chopped in half by accident by a turf cutter. But he has a little goatee beard. He was killed by an axe blow to the head, we believe. But see his beautiful hairstyle, lovely Celtic kind of hairstyle. And it's in a bun. And it's kept together with a resin that comes from France or Spain. And to have this resin, he would have had to have been a nobility, possibly. So this is kind of a theory behind Cloneycavan man. Like, he wasn't just your average person walking through a bog. You know, he was possibly very purposely killed. But old Cookin man, anyway, to tell his story, he would have been about 26 years of age, possibly. That in around. He was about 6 feet tall, we believe. His body was cut in half. His arms were bound behind his chest. His head was chopped off, and he was stabbed in the chest. His arms were bound behind his back, sorry. So he was very purposely killed. But his hands, that is what's most important here. His hands are so perfect, so perfectly manicured nails, and really, you could fingerprint him when they found him. His hands are so perfect that we believe he was possibly a king or a noble that was raised to be sacrificed to the land. So very, very sad story. And most importantly, his nipples were pierced, and suckling on a king's nipples was part of the inauguration ceremony. And did he know he was going to be raised to be sacrificed? And you know, the whole story is so important, and it opens up a whole new idea who these people were. It's so hard to know what the story of the Irish people was, or, you know, our past. And anything that tells us, gives us some clue as to our past is very important.
From bodies to written psalms to stories of sacrifice and more, these bogs hold a lot of history. But for all that Ireland's bogs have preserved her past, how are we ensuring their future? Every day, more and more bogs are slowly decaying, degrading as they reach a point of no return, exposing centuries of delicate peatland and destroying a valuable tool in the fight against climate change.
There's only a very small percent of bogs in Ireland that have not in some ways been degraded. That's through excavation, through drainage, or any of those things. And those have major changes to the water systems, to the carbon storage function, all those types of things. So Ireland is moving towards restoration of degraded bogs. They are working towards rehabilitating those, blocking the drainage, raising the water table, reestablishing some of the vegetation. There's a lot of education going on about the value of bogs. Now, in terms of climate, they store carbon from the atmosphere, carbon that otherwise would be up there as CO2. So they're basically a land-based stock of carbon that we need to keep in the ground. Let's keep it there. Let's preserve it. Let's value it. We need to be looking after our natural landscape and our natural heritage, not just from a climate change perspective, but also from a biodiversity perspective and a clean water perspective, all those things. But bogs do play a huge role in climate change.
I hope we do manage to preserve the bogs so that things more, you can't imagine what's still out there, you know. The bogland is so vast in the Midlands in Ireland and all around Ireland. Yeah, I'd like to think we can preserve them for that purpose, as well as the very important issue of the climate as well, you know. But I know many people will disagree with me that that's our livelihood, you know. So it's like our treasure trove, you know. It's our we don't know what's out there. It is extremely important to our cultural identity, heritage. I can't imagine what is out there.
Luckily, not all hope is lost. 139 raised bogs all across Ireland are now protected. And while the debate between retaining traditions and prolonging a future stands strong, there's no denying the impact humans have had on these important landscapes and the importance they serve to our planet. Our curiosity has led us to uncover all sorts of mysteries, scientific and cultural, that lay buried beneath the decaying vegetation and age-old dirt of Ireland's mighty bogs. A scientific wonder dots the Irish countryside, providing an undeniable beauty and showcasing a rich ecosystem home to a delicate balance of degradation and rebirth. Below a muggy surface of water and moss, near perfectly preserved artifacts lie, holding records of ancient society that provide historians with a unique insight into the lives of the old Irish. Vast stretches of these unique, eerie landscapes may even hold an answer to the ever-pressing matter of humanity's future on Earth, sequestering carbon from a rapidly degrading atmosphere. The secrets of the bogs remain abundant and rich, a brightly coloured thread in Ireland's grand tapestry. But their presence on our planet remains uncertain. Harmful practices threaten to eliminate and degrade these precious landscapes that mean so much to the history of the land. The bogs of Ireland have preserved our past. Now it's our turn to preserve their future.